And our final speaker is Oliver Johnson, Head of eMobility UK at ABB. Now, Oliver has been heavily involved in both the technical and commercial deployment of medium and high power charging right throughout the UK. And again, if you have any questions directly for Oliver, as you'll have heard me putting them to our panelists this morning, please send them through to us and we will be able then to put them to our guests once we've heard from them. So Oliver, let me hand over to you for a few moments.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I think we passed that hour in the day where we passed into the afternoon. Thank you for all of the conversations that have taken so far. I'm not quite sure left what I've got to say because a lot of things have been discussed. So I will touch a little bit on ABB, and I will also talk through various parts of the journey that ABB has taken to get us into this space in the EV market, being a leading vendor of technology to charge the cars. So I think when you look at ABB, we joined the journey in EV probably 12 years ago now, when we purchased a small startup called Epion in the Netherlands, and have heavily invested in that over the last 12 years and worked with the organizations in the world and the car OEMs. So you got Sharon and Chademo that have really been at the forefront of driving this technology, because part of the ability to charge a car in a good way is really founded on standardization. So this is rather boring for most people, and using a car, you just want to turn up and plug it in and it works every single time in a seamless way. But there's lots of technology that sits behind that plug, both on the vehicle and in the charger, which makes all of that work. So ABB has really been at the forefront of the standardization bodies that sit behind that and work with the OEMs behind closed fences and closed doors. I've had the pleasure of working with most of the UK OEMs which are producing electric vehicles in the UK or designing electric vehicles in the UK, but right across the market globally, we work with all of the OEMs. And this puts us in a good position because we understand how the vehicles work, how the communications work between the car and the chargers. And we try and improve that slowly over time and work with the OEM cars and the standardizations body to try and get that seamless interoperability between the vehicles and the chargers that people really want. Now, because of the different car manufacturers that are out there, because of the different technologies that exist, that's been dreamt up in different parts of the world in terms of design teams, this is always a challenge. So this is something that we're always improving, or always pushing small updates to our equipment in the world to make sure that every time new vehicles come to the market, we test them, we check them with our equipment, and make sure that by the time it ends up on the street for Joe Public to plug into, that we've got good technology. So that's just a bit of a technology roadmap, but today ABB has grown to a substantial vendor of this type of equipment. So we've got about 800 employees, about 250 R&D engineers. And earlier on, Richard from BP talked about the number of charge sessions, the number of miles delivered. They were talking about 1 million miles delivered. We calculate roughly we've delivered about 1.5 trillion miles of electrification into cars, buses, heavy goods vehicles, all types of vehicles that our equipment have plugged into. Our manufacturing is global. We've got chargers in roughly 85 different countries, about 20,000 different pieces of equipment out of there. And the pressure to build new manufacturing facilities and the pressures on the whole supply chain in the whole world, both to produce vehicles and chargers, is immense right now. Now, even if you're a builder building a house right now, everyone's acutely aware of the supply issues that are in the market of materials as simple as building materials. And this is a global challenge for both OEMs and also equipment manufacturers like ABB. When you're looking at high power charging in the UK and even regular charging, say 50 kilowatt or home charging, we've got lots of equipment deployed with many of the leading car OEMs and the leading charge point operators. ABB doesn't operate the equipment. We generally sell the tech to operators like BP, like other customers we've got in the UK. And the idea is to bring that to the customers in the best way possible, where they've got help desks, they've got support functions, to really give the consumer the experience that they're looking after. And then we're really there to look after the deep tech, as it were. I guess going back to the questions is, how do you accelerate and make it easier for anyone to switch? I think the key bit there is, somebody once told me you have to do something 100 times to form a habit. And I'm always astounded every time I go to a charge point to charge my car that the number of people that have no clue what they're doing, or the number of people that I bump into is the first time they've charged, because they typically charge the car at home, and it's typically the first time they've plugged into a public charger. And many of the cars work in different ways. You have to lock them, unlock them, different catches, etc. So the habitualization of charging a car needs to become quite embedded in people and understood by people. And I think in the same way that putting fuel in a normal car, it is really it should just become standard. And then part of the technology that's evolving in the background, that we're working on and have been involved in, is this plug and charge. So the networks can recognize your vehicle when you plug in. So once you've associated it with your account, you can then just plug in and it automatically recognizes it as a bona fide user, as an account, and then takes the money out of your account, as it were. But that avoids the human interaction with it. But I think contactless, I think that's being covered by everybody, is a key thing to allow anybody to charge, especially the newbies or the people that won't publicly charge very often. Again, many people may own an EV and may only do 1 or 2 long journeys in their average month or average year. And at that stage, they just want to do tap and go and progress the way that on their journey in a good way. So I think all of those things need to be simple. From a home charging point of view, I think those things also need to become habitual, and I think they also need to be made much easier from implementation, from a domestic installation point of view. My personal experience having to deal with UK power networks, dealing with my electricity retailer, dealing with my installer, as it were, to get those things on the wall. I think that process also needs some legislative change to make it easier for the installers to remove fuses or do works on behalf of your local DNO. And all of those things will change those things as well. Just another thought while we've sort of thinking about things, an interesting one. ABB's been doing an emoji competition to really motivate the future users of EV cars and inspire them. And we get a lot of inspiration through that, and that should be announced today who the winner of that is. But that made me think about my own son, who's currently learning to drive, and he's hassling me to get hold of a car which is an automatic, so he can gain an automatic driving license, sorry, a manual driving license, because the EV is no good to him to learn, and if he wants to use a manual car in the future. So there's just a little nugget there maybe of things. Just looking forward, in terms of addressing, we've talked about the DNOs, we've talked about the connection issues related to setting up charging hubs. Richard's covered that, Rachel's covered that. These are very, very raw points at the moment, getting land, getting connections for electricity. This has to become much easier. To help the electricity networks, the future tech, the high power, the contactless, easy cable management. In the future, we're also looking into virtual power plants, so where domestic installations running on AC chargers are also connected to the grid network. If the grid network has an issue with power, we can throttle all of those devices. And this is very much something which we're looking into in the future, which we're delivering today with partners. And this will also help the UK and its electricity network grow and develop and support the EV network. So I think some of the points have been covered by the other speakers very well, so I've dropped them out of my conversation, but hopefully a little bit of insight from myself.
And do you know what? I think you've raised a really interesting point, though, about young people learning to drive, because I was wondering whether my 15-year-old would indeed need to learn to drive a manual car. You know, I think it's fascinating to know, and then that's a change to the whole driving test, isn't it? Anyway, without getting into that, but it is part of the discussion when we look at the future. Some questions for you, Oliver, if that's okay.
That's fine.
A question here. So these are questions that have come into me, so not necessarily my view. Here's one. Your charging technology and expertise is behind many, if not most, of today's chargers. What continue to be the biggest challenges? What are the most exciting developments you see coming?
Sure. So I think some of the most some of the challenges are just the huge number of different EVs that are arriving on the market. And again, it comes back down to this habitual charging thing. So people's experience and the nuances that go with that. So that's a big challenge. And I said, you know, the amount of times I go to a charge station and chat with various different people that really have not got a clue, A, how their car functions, and B, how the charger should interact with the car. Even if it's just literally plug in, tap your card, they still mess with the screen, do different things. So there's a whole user experience type thing that needs to, or the education needs to become habitual or understood. And in terms of developments, we're constantly pushing the envelope of high power charging, so that the ability to deliver, we've already got that in many of the charge point operators in the UK today, the ability to deliver 350 kilowatts. And for the nerds out there, that's up to 500 amps of energy going into your car. And so there's cars out there that are already taking that energy, and you can charge that fast. And I think that will continue to be an interesting development, how that's deployed, and the cables that you need to do that, and the cable management you need to do that. One key thing is the car OEMs, and maybe a question back to Sarah. They keep putting the sockets in the cars in different places. Yeah. And the advantage Tesla has got, they've all got the socket on the rear left-hand side, and everybody else has splattered them around the car. So we've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy producing highly flexible, super thin, super liquid cooled cables with very long reaches on them to reach around the cars to meet all of these sockets, regardless of what the parking arrangement you have, drive through, end in, rear in, whatever you want, however you want to put your car, you can get to the socket with the cable. So
yeah, that's a great point, and we will ask Sarah that later. I'll let you directly address that point with her. And I'm so embarrassed to say I still get, because I charge pretty much solely at home, when I do have to do a charging point, I still have that panic where I go, what's the right pinhole, which is ridiculous. 4 years on, completely ridiculous. Another one here, the transition to fleets is currently an important driver of EV demand, and of course will bolster the second-hand EV market going down the line. ABB has committed to 100% electric fleet by 2025, and we are rapidly getting towards that date. So the question is, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going very well, actually. So we were part of a sort of and my colleague were part of a sort of an internal team that pushed the UK forward as part of one of the first countries in ABB to go all electric. So I think we're halfway through our fleet by now. So I think out of a fleet of 400 cars, we're up to 200 vehicles in that fleet. Now, many of those have happened or come to pass during the lockdown periods. So people are now desperately wanting the public charging infrastructure to meet the demand that they're driving, and we get lots of feedback from that. So yeah, we're halfway there. We will meet the target definitely, because the roll off of the end of the scale. We are still looking at larger fleet vehicles with longer range for service engineers. So that's also, there's more vehicles coming into that space from some of the OEMs that we're working as well. So that should also be, we should be able to click those vehicles off the list as well, where they need maybe 250, 300 mile range with a full load, which aren't really available today. Okay.
When are we going to see the emoji, by the way, the winning emoji?
I don't know. I've been separately chatting in the background with somebody else on chat to try and find out where it is and what it looks like, so I could potentially.
Can you give us a world exclusive here?
That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to stick it on my backdrop, but it's not there. So yeah.
Well, it's not on my phone yet, because I've been looking for that as well. And just a final question before we go to our group discussion. And it's one about, I suppose, how we compare to Europe, which is something that came up when we spoke to Rachel McLean earlier. But this question, I've seen reports that ABB rapid chargers tend to be more reliable on the European mainland because they are better established and there are more extensive maintenance teams. Is that true? And if so, what is being done to try and meet those sorts of standards here in the UK?
Yeah, sure. So the European, depending on the networks you're talking about, depends on how they're supported. So it's really dependent on what's already deployed, and a lot of the statistics come out of what's being done in the past, etc. So the UK is going through a massive growth, and there's some catch up taking place in terms of serviceability and the ability to get to things quickly. And again, that will increase and will become in line with the European expectations that have been set forward. But again, in the UK, you've seen obviously the government mantra of 99 point whatever it is percent, but certainly in the high 90s, not in the middle 90s as to where we are today.
Okay, brilliant. I have been told that apparently the winning emoji is available online somewhere. So I think we should see if we can get hold of it so we can share
I'll maybe
it.
leave that to our, I'll leave it to you guys to dig that out and stick it up.
I'm doing my best. Listen, thank you so much. So that is Oliver Johnson.